All right. Well, welcome. If you're joining us live on the podcast, on the Bigger Life podcast, welcome. If you are watching this thing live, also welcome. We've got an awesome guest today. I'm super excited. He is an author, a public speaker, a business trainer. I consider him a longtime friend and recent reconnect, Pete Honsberger. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Honsberger. Welcome,
Andy, thanks
buddy.
for having me. Yeah,
Dude.
thank you. Thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Of course. I feel like this conversation is going to be wildly helpful and entertaining for a lot of our audience. We are literally going to cover everything from dad life to we want to hear about your travels in being an author, helping people in business. Man, there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like I could go in just about any direction you could think
Oh,
of.
my goodness. Yeah. So everyone listening, buckle up because this is going to be a fun ride. First off, I want to get rolling with this right away because it's hot off the presses. There it is. The Curse of Captain Cole. If you aren't watching this one and you're just listening, I just held up the front cover to Pete's recent release. Congratulations, man. That's awesome. If I'm following and counting correctly, that's book number 3. Is that right?
Technically book number 3, although the first 2 were the same topic.
Good enough, man.
Yeah, the second was a rewrite of the first, but yeah, you're right. Technically, 3 books.
That is 3 more books than I have written. This one, I guess, tell us a little bit about it.
This is a children's book. So I've had some rhymes in my head and down in various notebooks for about the last 10 years. And it started with the stanza of just envisioning, a young man / child out at sea on a boat running into a pirate and all kinds of hijinks ensuing. And just the flow of it, almost a limerick style rhyme, is how I started writing it. And I never thought it would turn into a book, but I got serious about it a couple of years ago and thought, especially when my wife became pregnant and we realized we were going to have our first child, I thought, how cool would it be to have a children's book that's published that I could actually read to my own kid. So that's
cool.
Kind of how it started.
Yeah, no, and I definitely read it, went through the whole thing. It's great, man. I did not expect it to be like a poem book almost. And don't take me wrong, it's not a poem book, but it has flow to it and has rhyme. So I open up and I get to the first page. I'm like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. I've got to get ready to go. I felt like it's one I have to practice before I start reading it to my son. But it's
there's
awesome.
Like beats to it, isn't there?
There sure is.
Try to get everything on the right beat, and that was the hardest part of writing it, was trying to keep that same rhyme scheme and keep it going. But I just thought when I was read things as a kid, I really liked when there was a flow and there was a rhyme, and it helped me remember things. And all the TV shows that my daughter watches now are typically rhyming singing shows. Those are her favorites. Granted, she's only a year and a half old, but I thought there might be something fun to it, and it almost feels like a piratey kind of sing-song quality, almost sure like does. Chants would happen on a boat.
Oh yeah, it's so good. I was really blown away, when I wrote a children's book. I'm like, okay, cool. It's probably like the ones that I usually read.
Yeah,
and I open it up.
Run.
Exactly. There it is. Nailed it. It's great. Like the illustrations are awesome. Talk to me about that. What was it like? Like, did you go into this with Sam, your illustrator, with an idea, or did you just give it to him or them and run? What was that like?
It was really interesting. I had some ideas, but I found Sam through a mutual friend and client of ours in my full-time job. Awesome. And it all came about even getting mixed up with her because I was going over personal goals with this client, and he was showing me his goals and I was showing him some of my goals. And one of them was get this children's book that I have in a rough draft form eventually illustrated and published. And he said, I have cartoonists on staff at my company. Would you be interested, if some of them are interested in freelance work, would you like me to make an introduction? I said, absolutely. So to me, that was what was the catalyst to actually getting this thing illustrated, was using a connection in my own personal network that I never explored before. And so that kind of made me think every step along the journey, okay, who's another person or who's somebody else that I might be able to tap into as a connection so that there's a mutual benefit here. So when Sam came on board, it was pretty much a yes right away. And she's actually local to the Cleveland area, just like I am. So that was really nice to be able to meet in person. And then during COVID, we met over Zoom several times. But I gave her different pages and said, hey, here's kind of how I envision this. And then she really brought it to life. So it was a lot of her vision that was brought into it. And so I was giving her feedback along the way and saying, hey, it'd be really cool if we did this with the pages, and that with the pages. And what turned out is there's 2-page spreads. So almost the whole book is written in 2-page spreads that both come together when you open the page. And that was all her. That was her idea. And I think that's something that took the illustration to the next level anyway.
And it's done so well. I feel like you look at the pictures and it's like, this is to me, it felt like a children's version of a comic book. Like, it was awesome. It looks so good. It's crystal clear. It's just, I feel like it stands out differently than anything else we're kind of used to seeing, at least for anyone out there actively reading stories to toddlers or kids. Like, it does. To me, it stands out on the bookshelf. It's great.
I
well
agree.
done.
The level of detail that she brought to the table was something I was not expecting. I thought it might just be kind of a cookie cutter or a very, very simple illustrations, but she went all out, and the result, I think, is beautiful.
That's cool. How many times, if you had to guess, have you read this to your daughter?
Probably 15 to 25.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
The truth is, I typically get through about 2 pages each time before she starts grabbing at the pages and trying to rip them. She's tore up a couple copies, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, good.
But the cutest thing is when she'll grab it and she'll carry it over to me, where she just wants me to open it and start reading. And I might only get through a couple pages, but yeah, I've tried to read it to her a bunch of times.
Yeah, no, that's the best. So dad life, I am the father of a 18-month-old. You are the father of a also 18-month-old.
Yep.
Man, that is wild.
Yep.
I have a few other friends that are also parents of like 18, 19-month-old. It's just wild how all that happens. You know, you kind of go away for a little bit and then come back, you poke your head up and you're like, man, there's a lot of people that are literally in my exact same situation. I have to ask because I exist somewhere on this spectrum. So the spectrum, I call it, is the cuddle spectrum. So when you had your daughter, if 1 was like, this is not my kid, do not touch me, or if 10 is like, I need to hold this kid 100% of the time, where do you fall in that baby cuddle spectrum?
I'm at least a 9.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and she won't allow it all the time, but that makes us want to cuddle even more because, you know, when she first started to learn how to walk around, 9 to 10 months, stand up and do the furniture walk, she would not sit still. So she would never cuddle. And so we were always begging her, come up and sit on our lap, come up and hang out on the couch, we'll watch your favorite show. Now that she's been able to walk for quite some time, she's a lot more likely to run it. If you come home from work, run and jump on you, or be willing to sit and watch on the couch. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, just from the first time we saw her, we just wanted to have her in our arms as much as we could.
And now,
how about you?
I was going to say, hold on, fast forward to now in 18-month-old land, which is drastically different from immobile. I'm laying here looking like a peanut. Now it's toddler playtime. Where do you exist on that spectrum? Like 10 is like, I will sit down and play dolls, Barbie, cars, whatever it may be, 24 hours a day. And 1 being like, I will not play with you ever. Where do you think you are?
I think probably an 8.
Nice.
And the only reason it's not a 9 or a 10 is because my legs and my knees start to hurt after a couple hours of being crawling around, and all that 100%. Kind of stuff. But
100%.
I find myself on the kitchen floor, on the living room floor, on the basement floor, just crawling around and all kinds, trying to get her attention, doing hide and seek, playing with the toys. So I'm constantly playing with her.
All right. So truth be told, for me, if it's the cuddle spectrum, I'm like a 3. I was not all about cuddle life, and I don't know why. My wife, though, she's like a 20, if that even exists. She nonstop. When it comes to playtime, though, all the playtime. I have an 18-month-old as boy as you can possibly get. Loves big trucks, garbage trucks, heavy machinery, any of that, cars. He would watch the movie Cars on repeat nonstop. If he could make it happen, we obviously limit that as much as possible. But man, oh man, this kid is a boy as can be, and I love it. It is so much fun.
That's cool. That is cool. And ours is a big runner, a walker and a runner. We think she's going to be a future track athlete. But anything with
Amazing.
animals, she's obsessed with. You know,
Do
any
you go
TV
through?
show, movie with animals.
Do you go through all the animal noises? What does a cow say? What does a
Yep.
horse say? You got those? All right, cool.
Yep,
Yeah,
and
you got to make
I
sure.
hear it in my sleep too with the toys that we have that shout out, you know, the cow says moo, a pig says oink, so on and so
Right,
forth.
right. So we're bouncing around a little bit, but I've got to go back to something you said about when you're talking about Sam and the illustrations and
Mhm.
finding Sam through someone you work with and starting to recognize opportunity there. I will say that that's awesome that you found that, because I feel like, especially in the past 2 years, that we're virtual, right? And
Yep.
so many companies and businesses are virtual. We now have the ability to do that, so we are putting in these inherent boundaries and barriers around ourselves. And
Right.
good, bad, or otherwise, you can make a case for both sides. I'm not about to make a case for either side.
Mhm.
I just love the fact that you recognize it and can build community, and now you're starting to look for other opportunities just kind of as you go. And I will say that in our line of work and what we do, connecting with people, that is one of the reasons we're doing this
Yep.
podcast, doing this live stream channel, to be able to connect with people in different ways that can bring value to, like, cross community. You know what I mean? And I think
Absolutely.
that is the benefit of what the past 2 years has taught us. And I think you can probably speak to that as well in recent experience, right?
Absolutely. Well, if you think about more of a virtual world, like to some extent that does take away a barrier because it's easy to pop on a Zoom with somebody, a lot easier and less of a barrier of difficulty than if I would have to drive to a coffee shop to meet with somebody. And honestly, I spent more time talking to extended relatives probably during the pandemic than I had in the last 5 years because everybody lives spread out, but everybody can get on a monthly Zoom where we just catch up as aunts, uncles, nephews, things like that. So that in some regards, it's easier to get together like that. And when it comes to trying to get things done, we've been preaching, and my founder at my full time job has preached for the last couple of years the who, not the how. And so, when we want to develop a course, when we want to create when I want to create a book, when I want to try to get something done that I don't know how to do, I don't have to necessarily figure out how to go do that myself. I might just think about who else is out there who would know how to do this. And that's been something that's opened my eyes a lot more, probably starting with the Sam situation, and it's continued into other projects that I'm interested in, as well as future work courses and programs that we're developing from that standpoint.
No, right. And it takes so much of the pressure off you if you're willing to just admit, like, hey, I don't know how to do this.
Yep.
I bet you I can figure it out, but it's going to take me like 10 times as much time. It's going to be like halfway okay.
Yep.
But if I'm just willing to raise my hand and say, I don't know, like, who else in my community does know, or who outside of my community can I get connected with? Like, it's going to go way better. Just being willing to admit, like, hey, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's
I do.
resources.
Yeah, no,
Right.
exactly. And there's so many. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing too, is, anyone could probably Google how to do something and find 100 paid resources, but there's websites like Fiverr and Workable and all kinds of websites too that are out there that you can get connected with people you otherwise wouldn't have gotten connected with. And I've even had some success connecting with people through Facebook groups and things like that who are in some sort of line of work, getting advice on, hey, I ran into another roadblock with this children's book that I'm self-publishing. How do I do this because I'm completely lost? And then you get 5 or 6 comments of people trying to help you out and understand what you're going through, and then giving you kind of the key to getting through that. And that was my entire journey with both books. Really, was just one issue after another, just figuring out a way to solve it, getting past that, and then on to the next thing.
Yeah, and that honestly brings me to the next point I wanted to make. You said your other book, it's a wedding toasts book.
Sure.
What? Okay, so why? How did you get to? I need to write a book about wedding toasts, or
well, it's
how
a
to give
wildly
them,
different
or get
topic
it.
than the children's book, as you can
Yep.
imagine, and that's a little bit to my personality of just liking to try different things instead of have everything be linear like that.
Right.
But it started. I've just always enjoyed either writing or hearing other speeches that are really interesting and engaging to the audience. So I gave my older brother's best man speech back in 2012, and I was trying to figure out how to make this interesting or fun, but not take too much time. So I made that thing rhyme. So it ended up being a rhyming about a 2.5-minute toast that the whole thing rhymed, and nobody expected that was going to happen. It just,
right.
I started it and the first sentence rhymed and then the second sentence rhymed, and I could see the crowd start to look like, is this whole thing going to rhyme? So that went over really well, and it was a lot of fun. And after that, I had a couple people from the wedding come up and ask me to help them write their toast, or, hey, do you have any advice? Because I liked that was kind of a unique situation. And then, after that, I started having other closer friends and then acquaintances. And after maybe the 6th or 7th person over that next 2 to 3 years asked me if I would help them write their best man or maid of honor toast, I thought that I might be onto something. I thought there might be a market for it. So I actually tried to research and thought about what was out there. And I didn't find, anything that was dominating the wedding toast space. There didn't seem like one resource. There was a handful of sort of like quotes or starters for your toast, but there was nothing really that was a comprehensive guide or format. So that's where I started with that idea. And then around the same time, I got interested in listening to podcasts. So I listened to a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire, and one of the things from that podcast was this journal that would help you set a goal for 100 days. And you basically had to be accountable to the journal, and you would write in it. It was a physical journal called the Freedom Journal, which I think is actually available still if anybody's interested. But my 100-day goal, I said, you know what? It's time to stop talking about it, and it's time to do it. So in 100 days, I'm going to have a rough draft of a book. So this is, working full time, doing this a couple nights a week and on the weekends at coffee shops or on my couch. And I just started with a blank Word document. I started with, sort of chapter headings and some of the main points that I wanted to hit on. And then I fleshed it out chapter by chapter, ended up having a rough draft after 100 days. It took me another month or so to tweak it and add a little bit of language and that kind of stuff. And then I Googled, how do you publish a book? Because I had no idea how to do that.
That's the logical next step. You finish a book and you're like, now how do I publish this?
Yeah. And I got, linked up with an organization that helps first-time authors publish books. And so they kind of walked me through the process, and it turned out to be a really cool finished product. And at that time, the book was called Don't Burn Your Toast. So that was the name of the wedding toast book. And about 1.5 years into that, after just kind of hustling, sending emails to local bookstores saying like, hey, I'm a local author. Would you be willing to put a couple copies on your shelf? To doing as much outreach and social media as I could, have the capability to at the time, it caught the attention of Simon & Schuster. And so they reached out to me and said that they'd like to purchase it and then actually have me rewrite and re-release it, this time using professional editors and using people that that knew exactly what was going to be like a little more universally accepted and was going to be more valuable to a wider audience. So that took another 8 to 9 months then. So I had to take Don't Burn Your Toast off the shelf. It was unavailable. And then Wedding Toast 101 is what came out of that process. And so that was, I believe, November of 2018. Wedding Toast 101 was finally released.
Wow. That's incredible. That's such a cool kind of story, I guess. And the fact that, so I looked at all that, I looked through the book, I read part of the book, I read part of the, the kind of the format. What would you say would be feedback? Like, what are you getting back from people after they've read the book or gone through it? Have you gotten any like crazy stories or anything like that?
Yeah, every once in a while, somebody will send me an Instagram direct message that just says, hey, I've got a speech like in 2 days. Can you help me? And that kind of thing. So those are kind of funny.
Amazing. Right.
And so, when I get those messages, I try to do what I can. If I have time, I'll try to take a look. And the feedback that primarily I've gotten is that they like the fact that there's a simple format, that it doesn't box people in to whatever they'd like to do for their toast. It just gives you 5 steps that you really should make sure that you're talking a little bit about each of these 5 steps if you want to have a complete toast and something that you're really proud of, something that doesn't forget to talk about the other person in the toast, something that makes sure that you start fast and you end with a bang, that kind of thing. So I've gotten a lot of that feedback. They like the simplicity. I think people really like to see the full speeches. So there's 5 full speeches at the end. A couple of them are written by me, and a couple of them are written by friends or family or people that I've gotten submitted to me since the first version came out. So that's really been the feedback. Some people have different types of feedback than that. But for the most part, the simplicity, the fact that it is a step-by-step format, and it's supposed to be written in a fun and kind of a lighthearted tone, which I acknowledge in the book that, look, it's not a matter of life and death whether you write a great wedding toast, but it's usually one of the most important days in the life of a married couple. So if you have that responsibility or you have that opportunity, you might as well make it count.
Absolutely. So when it comes to giving a toast, I feel like this kind of bleeds into a lot of our entrepreneur friends or business friends that are listening to this, or maybe just, you're in a situation with work that you do have to talk in an office meeting or something. There's a lot of anxiety, right? When talking in front of people. And still, I'll hear from people that they've got anxiety, even just on a Zoom meeting, like they're afraid to either deliver a point, press unmute, or say something that might contradict the way that the meeting is going. Have you had people reach out to you either because of the book or because of what you do when it comes to like business training? Has that come up? Do you feel like that's a point or a place where you talk a lot about or give advice a lot?
It has definitely come up, and it's kind of come up from two different angles. One angle is someone just saying, I want to feel more confident or more empowered when I'm actually speaking in front of a group. How do I do that? The second angle is I have a lot of times a leader who's leading a meeting that will say to me, I'm trying to get my people to speak, especially if it's a Zoom meeting. Like, what do I do? How can I, as a facilitator or the leader of a business meeting, actually get more participation? Because I want to hear the voices and I want to hear what people have to say. So the first one is when someone just wants more confidence or they have that anxiety. What I typically recommend is, number one, is if you're building content for what you're going to say, try to build it in a way that you would want to hear it if you were in the audience. So I just try to put myself in their shoes. So if I'm sitting in a business meeting, someone's giving me a presentation, I typically wouldn't want someone just to read off of a PowerPoint. I don't want somebody looking at their shoes. I don't want it to be super dry, super businessy all the time. I'd prefer to have a little bit of interest and a little bit of fun and a little bit of humor mixed in there. I'd like them to think about, what the audience would like, and then go from there. So, the other thing I would say is, if you don't want the attention on you the whole time, believe it or not, even if you're giving a speech, you don't have to have the attention on you every single second of that speech. You can put a quote in, you can put a video clip or multiple video clips to take the attention off of you, and then that basically supplements the content so that it's not all on you. And some of the most engaging talks that I've given, or even business trainings, I try to work in video clips, video footage, even from pop culture movies and things like that are somewhat relevant or that has a tie-in to the point I'm trying to make. So those two things have helped me at least. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you care and you're showing the audience that you care about what you're doing, then you should be able to sleep pretty well at night knowing you gave it your best shot. So
I love that.
You don't have to,
awesome.
You don't all have to have the exact same style. You just have to care.
No, exactly. And I heard this from a coach of mine. He's at this point, he functions primarily as just a friend that we bounce ideas off of.
Doesn't that happen a lot too?
Oh my gosh.
Kind of relationship.
All the time. Yeah. Cause you go so far with coaching and training and whatnot. It's like, okay, yeah. Now we're like, so much about me. Like, it's been totally transparent. Like, yeah. Okay. So now there's this deeper friendship. And one of the biggest things that he kept saying to me is that stop just trying to deliver a point. Like, stop trying to go straight at the point. And he's like, I know why you want to do it. I know why you lead with information first. It's because you're so efficiency minded. Like, you feel like if you can just hit him with the point, hit him with all the things in and out, then it's great. Like, you've done your job. They will connect the dots on their own. They'll put it through their own filters and it'll be fine. But he's like, the point hits harder if you can share a personal experience or a personal story and then tie that to the point. So if you can weight your personal experience 2/3 and the point 1/3, they'll do the rest. But they've got to relate it from a less analytical side and a more emotional side. And if you can do that, you're gonna kill no matter what. And you can take that information and apply it to almost any speech, any situation, any information dispersing setting. And I think it's so much more effective. And that, honestly, he gave me that nugget about 6 weeks ago. and it's
Okay.
like totally blown my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm still processing on how it actually works. I've given 2 live speeches or talks recently, and I've tried it, and it's a total rewiring, like
Okay.
totally rewiring. But I feel like it's been so incredibly beneficial.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah. That is wild. And like, a client told us a couple of years ago that stuck with me, and they may have been paraphrasing a quote they heard, but really people aren't going to remember every single word that you tell them. They're not even going to remember all the concepts you try to share with them, but they're going to remember how they felt when they walked out of that session. So if we can do that kind of stuff. And when you talked about relating to people, there's a little bit of vulnerability that comes with that. So I have to be willing to admit something about myself if I'm going to expect other people to get in that frame of mind. So, I can relate to people because most of us have had some kind of shared experiences. And that's a way that I can connect with people and let them know that, hey, I'm not up here delivering this presentation because I think that I'm perfect or because I've got the exact right thing to say at all times. I've made mistakes, and I'm going to share some of those because chances are you've made some of or found yourself in similar situations as well. So really, if you can have like a little bit of vulnerability and not try to go out there and have the perfect speech, just try to connect with people. Like, I think that speaks to that 2/3, 1/3 that you were just mentioning.
It definitely does. And I found myself when I do know that I have a larger audience and it is live and they're there to gain information, they're there for a specific thing. I started to throw out this disclaimer, and it wasn't even consciously, it just kind of happened. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I just want to say that I don't proclaim to be the expert on this topic. I just know that I've had a little bit of success with it, and it's what works for me. Like, it's totally natural for me, and this is how I do it. This might not even close to something you can deliver on, but I hope that you can find some value in the way that I talk about what I do find success in, and it's my own little personal disclaimer, but I feel like it's kind of necessary because just because I've got a microphone, doesn't mean that I am the only person that you need to go to for this.
Yep. Well, and even if you want to break the ice quickly, this happened to me this week, actually on Wednesday morning of this week. I spoke to a group of about 110 people with a client, and I was leading a training that lasted about 2 hours. This was a spring kickoff meeting for this company. And about 5 minutes before I went on, I tried to stand up to get out of my chair to go get a bottle of water, and I flipped the chair over. So it was an aluminum chair on like a cement surface. We were out in this big warehouse.
That's quiet.
Everybody looked. I kind of like made a little joke. So then when I get up there, the first thing I said is, my name is Pete, and I'm the guy that knocked over the chair. And there was a laugh, and I think it was kind of like, okay, this guy he's not the most buttoned up, person. He's not going to just try to read off a PowerPoint or give us this perfectly polished speech. He's going to actually relate to us as people. And I did that by just kind of making a joke at my own expense to start.
Honestly,
and I didn't do it on purpose either. I didn't.
Right.
The
more you can relate to people on just a ground human level, I feel like that gains so much. It's just like this podcast. As much as we want this to be the most perfect, polished everything, at the end of the day, it's not going to be. You know what I mean?
Well, and I was just thinking about that as I'm hearing banging above my head upstairs because my daughter's up from her nap, and it seems like she's throwing just about everything we have in the house onto the floor.
No, that's perfect. When you said a few minutes ago, it's maybe not exactly what you say. It's more how the situation or the information made you feel. Going back maybe a week or so, we did, for everyone listening, Pete and I did a call just to kind of reconnect and talk through a few things. And he gave me this nugget or this, I guess, story that I don't remember the ins and outs and the connectors. I do remember, though, that this thing was a total 10. And I said, I don't care what happens, where we go in this episode or this recording, the people listening have to hear this. And I do remember one key thing. It had to do with a buffalo. And I think that that should spark enough that you should be able to take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up.
Of course.
My full-time job is at a company called CultureShoc, and we exist to help organizations build and continue to grow high-performing workplace cultures that are high in trust and people get things done and you have really effective meetings. And our motto and our number one core value as an organization is be a buffalo. And it comes from this story we heard about 9 years ago now. And the story is that in the United States, buffalo act completely different than cows do in the United States when storms come. So if you imagine a storm coming west to east across the Great Plains, actually cows as a herd will lie down and do nothing, and they'll let the storm pass over them, or they'll actually turn and run in the opposite direction to try to get away from, the rain and the hail, and that's understandable. Buffalo actually do the opposite. They turn, they kick up dust, and they stomp their feet, and I'm assuming smoke comes out of their ears, and they actually run directly into the weather, and so they're running west, the storm's coming east, and it's going to be intense for a short period of time, especially at the beginning. But if they keep moving together, they're going to get through it a lot faster. They're going to spend more time in the green grass and in the blue sky. And so that's the metaphor for what we do as an organization. And anyone's storms could be a little bit different, but every company we work with, every team down to the individual, they have decisions to make every day. Do I charge head on into something that's difficult, whether it's an issue or an opportunity or a conversation that you have to have with an employee that you're not looking forward to having? Or do you shy away from it? Do you not say anything? Do you sweep things under the rug? Do you kick the can down the road 6 months on things? If I'm in a meeting and I feel like I have to say something, but I'm not comfortable saying it, if I sit on that issue and don't bring it up for a week or a month or 3 months, there might be some consequences. Because what we typically find is that if we run away from things that are important, they usually catch up with us eventually. And then we'll have to deal with something when it's a much bigger problem than it would have been if we would have had just dealt with it right away and met it head on. And so that's the story, and we call it the Buffalo story. And it's this into the storm mentality that we try to embody ourselves, and we try to help every client we work with do the same. And that comes in the form of having those feedback conversations, giving people honest, direct feedback for the sake of their success. Doing it respectfully and everything, but the same with, do you want to go out and write a book, or do you want to go out and complete a new program? Do you want to stay accountable to the X number of things you're supposed to be doing on a daily or weekly basis to be successful? Charging into the storm is doing those things and being accountable, whereas running away from the storm is, hey, I hope somebody else does this, or I hope somebody doesn't notice. And I actually keep a stuffed animal buffalo on my desk. And he looks at me if I've got to make a phone call because I double book myself with a client, and I kind of hope that the client just forgets and doesn't notice, and maybe I can get away with it. Or do I make the call and say, hey, I made a mistake, what can I do to make this right? And so on and so forth. And so there's all those like 100 or more decisions a day probably where I've got a choice. I can charge head on into something, even if it's really little, or I can shy away from it. So we believe that the more you charge into things, the faster you get through them, and the more time you spend in the sun and the green grass.
Oh, that story is so good. Again, I could not for the life of me connect those dots, but when you say it, I'm taken back to last week. Like, yeah, it's so good. I heard it was like everyone listening to this podcast has to hear this, because you can take that idea, that story, that mentality, and apply it to your personal life. You can apply it to your personal relationships. You can apply it to that maybe weird meeting with your boss. You can apply that to something with a client that you don't want to follow up with. Like, man, literally copy paste anywhere and take that mentality and just make it happen. I feel like that, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like that's maybe what is the unsung part of that whole thing. And that's the magic of it, is that it is uncomfortable. However, that short-term uncomfort, I guess, is going to make everything else get to resolution much faster. And
and a lot of times we think it's going to be bad, but it ends up not really being that bad. I had a client that I was working with that talked about, before really hammering home that concept, his client that he's working with, they kept going out of the scope for their project, in their industry, and he would just let it happen and just continue to eat the hours, and then the job's just less profitable. Well, he called the client and said, you know what, I got to be a buffalo about this. He called the client and said, hey, it's going to be this much extra. And the client said, okay, no problem. So he said, I would have eaten like whatever, $5,000 or $10,000 worth of extra hours in the past. But all I did was just say, you know what, whether they're annoyed or disappointed or upset in the moment, I can live with that. But this is the right thing to do for myself, for the firm, for my team. And then it really wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. And so, if we can get over that initial, discomfort, once, it gets a little tiny bit easier. And then if we can do it 10 times in a month or in a quarter or in a year, it gets even a little bit easier. And then you just continue to do that. And then more often than not, we're meeting things head on while there's still small issues, instead of And then when you do have to deal with big issues and, your business, your personal life, we're more likely to charge into those as our default instead of hoping somebody else makes a move.
Yeah, that's just it. It turns into a muscle, right? And the more
Right.
you work that muscle, the stronger it gets and the more natural it gets. And
Definitely.
it's less like contrived and like, okay, I really got to think about this. It just turns into second nature and you just kind of
Yep.
jump on it. And that's definitely a fantastic trait to pick up, even
Well, and anybody can
as an
do it,
occasional trait. Yeah, of course. Honestly, I feel like we could do this all day long.
Me too.
But I do have one more question that I feel like I do ask everyone because I think it's important. When it comes to books or podcasts or things that you had an aha moment with, what's on like a top 2 or 3 Pete Honsberger list for books or podcasts?
Well, what I just finished listening to the audiobook of a book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And he's
nice.
a pretty well-known management, guy if you're interested in management or leadership. But really that book's not even brand new, but I took out of it this concept that in any one-to-one relationship or even in a team setting, like if you have low trust in that relationship or in that organization, it typically things happen slower and it costs you more because we don't trust each other to do things for us. Everybody's micromanaging. We're looking over each other's shoulders. So in that sense, low trust is actually a tax on your organization or on your relationship. But if you have high trust, things happen faster and less expensive. So it's a dividend. And it's interesting. We're always talking about like, what's the point of trying to build trust within our companies? And it's even harder sometimes when we're dealing with all remote or hybrid employees. Well, it's a tax if you don't have trust, and it's a dividend if you do have trust. So the Speed of Trust is one that I really like. Atomic Habits, if anyone's trying to grow better habits and keep them sustained. It was
Such
written
a good
by
one. That's
an
a good
Ohio
one.
guy, James Clear, his name is.
Yep.
And then I would say the last one that I read recently that wasn't as much businessy, but I actually read the biography of Matthew McConaughey called Green Lights, and it reinforced to me that he's an out there kind of guy, but he was somebody who just spent his whole life kind of saying yes to things and looking for opportunities in any situation, and he calls them green lights. And so he said, I'm always looking for the green light. Where can I go? And that one's an interesting read. He's a wild guy, but I learned some things from that book, and and he took a couple green lights and made some things happen really early in his career that got him onto Dazed and Confused, the movie, and then kickstarted his career from there. So those were interesting to me, and I'm also a big podcast fan. I do like the Entrepreneur on Fire. I like anything around entrepreneurship. I also like a lot of music related podcasts and things like that. But there's one that I do think is really interesting. It's called Against the Rules with Michael Lewis. And that's
cool.
That really helped us birth our coaching offering at our company, and the mentality and the methodology around, you know what? You don't have to be an expert in somebody else's business to actually coach them. You just have to get really good at asking questions, and you have to let them discover the answers on their own, because chances are they have more answers than you do because they're in the position that they're in. So
the art of asking questions is oh man, it's this hidden art that it really helps. It helps people get to where they're trying to go. It helps people realize where they are. It helps people realize that they might not actually have a plan, even though they think they do have a plan.
Right.
Like if you can get good at asking questions, man, it's
and you
just only a matter of time. Too. Oh my gosh, yeah. The art of asking questions, no question.
Which I need. I may need you to give me some sales advice here after we wrap up.
Right, we can do a follow up. That's for sure. Sure. Pete, for everyone listening, I guess this might be the most important question of all. How do people find you? How do they connect with you? Where do they at you? Where do they do all of that at?
Sure. If you're interested, my Instagram is Pete OHWAIT. So Pete O Wait is my Instagram. You're welcome to follow me there. I'm just Pete Honsberger on Facebook. Each of the books has its own Instagram and Facebook page right now. So The Curse of Captain Cole is the @ for that. And then Wedding Toast 101 has an Instagram, but it also has a website. So if you're interested, I've got something called a Dynamite toast checklist that you can download for free. If you have to write a toast for a wedding coming up this year, and you just want a timeline and a checklist of when should I start thinking about this rough draft, when should I do the first practice run on that kind of thing. So it's a pretty simple checklist, but you can download that for free there, weddingtoast101.com. Otherwise, feel free to follow or message me anytime, and I'll do whatever I can to help.
Pete, thank you so much. I feel like you provided a ton of knowledge, a ton of awesome value to everybody listening and watching. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's so good to be able to connect with you on this level and be able to connect. And again, just share with the audience that we have. So thanks so much for taking your time and coming on here. For those of you listening, you can always follow us at Life with Waz. Tune into the podcast. Feel free to like and review, give a review for this episode. And again, thanks to Pete for being on here.
All right. Thank you to you too and all your listeners.